specific. At this time, did the Democrat observers in the Democratic Party and Vice President Al Gore's team argue for a partial recount?
Yes, sir.
When you do a recount of the whole county, and do you start with the lower numbers, or do you start at the highest precinct number and work backwards?
No, the system in Miami-Dade County is to start with the lower numbers and increase in arithmetic numbers.
And if you start the recount with the lower numbers, as is typically done, are you counting heavy Democrat precincts, or are you counting heavy Republican precincts?
You're counting heavy Democratic precincts because the system, as I described before, is moving from the coastline from the east, west, and south. And the traditional highly Democratic areas are in the north and to the east.
And what were the Democrats proposing on November 17 with respect to a partial manual recount?
Well, they proposed a number of things, but one of them was to only count the approximately 10,750 so-called undervotes.
And was a vote taken by the supervisory board on that idea on November 17?
Yes.
What was the vote?
The vote was to conduct a full countywide manual recount, and not just to count the undervotes.
What was the number of the vote? Was it 2-1, 3-0?
I recall that in this instance there was a 2-1. I think it was a 2-1. No, I'm sorry. It was a 3-0 vote on the full manual recount.
All right. Well, let me show you now this exhibit, a portion of the exhibit that I brought to your attention, Plaintiff's Exhibit 23. Yes. Mm-hmm. Would you take a moment and look at page 96?
Yes.
And do you see on page 96 at line 16 that Chairman King of the canvassing board is speaking?
Yes.
Would you read what Chairman King says on this matter through line 3 on page 97?
Yes, Chairman King. All right, thank you very much. I've read the statute. I've listened to Mr. Greenberg and Judge Lehr. I wish for your input, if you wish. It says under subsection 5A, E, and C of the Florida statute, in this case, for the record, 102.66, 166, section 5, subsection C, that the option available to this canvassing board, assuming the canvassing board were to consider voting yes or this issue, a manual recount of all ballots. I think it's pretty clear. It says shall, does not say may. It does, and here I believe that there is a typographical error on the part of the court reporter. It does say some part thereof. That's what the transcript says, but my recollection, he said it does not say some part thereof.
Well, Mr. Spencer, let me understand. Let's be sure we have competent evidence. Were you there to hear this speech by Judge King?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
Yes, I was.
And was Judge King making this statement with respect to the Democrats' attempt to get only a partial manual recount, that is, of 10,750 so-called undervotes?
That is correct.
And Judge King, the Democrat, voted against that?
Yes.
Was he, by the words that he used, was he mentioning a Florida statute that says that in a manual recount all the votes will be counted?
Yes, sir. And I've just cited to it.
All right, sir. Now, you correct me if I'm wrong, and I could well be. Later in the day on November 17, well, strike that. Let me start over. On November 17, did the manual recount start, or did something have to occur before that?
No, it did not start. Because it was such an extensive manual recount, preparations had to be taken in order to conduct the countywide manual recount. And so various plans were prepared to do that, and also preparation done in order to identify the approximately 10,750 undervotes.
Did you observe this process yourself?
Yes, I did.
All right. I want to ask you a couple of things based on your observations. What did the county canvassing board do with these 625,000 ballots in order to try to find undervotes?
Well, what occurred was that Supervisor Leahy announced that the Department of Elections had a software program which could go through all of the ballots for Dade County and identify those which were recorded by the sorting machines as so-called undervotes, and that his staff would then mechanically and physically separate the undervotes from all of the other votes. And that process was to take place, it was announced, on the 19th of November.
Do you know of your own observation whether this software program to cull out undervotes through another machine count was a new process that Mr. Leahy had been working on, or is it one that had been used in the past?
To the best of my knowledge, it was a program that had not been used often in the past, if it had been used at all. And as a result, some training had to be undertaken of the staff to utilize it.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a moment. And I believe you said that were the ballots run through the machine yet a third time? I'm talking about all 625,000 ballots in Dade County.
Yes. On November the 19th, I appeared at the tabulation room on the 19th floor of the Department of Elections, and the process was begun to run all of the ballots through the machines, through the sorters, and identify or attempt to identify all of the so-called undervotes.
Okay. Now, on November 20 and 21, were you on the scene observing?
Yes.
On November 22, were you on the scene observing?
Yes.
On November 22, one day after the Florida Supreme Court made a decision heard around the nation, on the next day, on November 22, what did the canvassing board of Dade County determine to do with respect to the manual recount that had been ongoing on November 20 and 21?
The board decided that due to the time limitation indicated by and ordered by the Supreme Court of Florida in its decision, that there was, in its view, insufficient time to do a competent and proper manual recount.
All right. Let me ask you this. About what percent of the precincts had been completed in this manual recount at the time the board voted to stop?
About, my recollection, it was about 20%, or 15 to 20% of the precincts.
And was that starting at the bottom with the lower numbered precincts working up?
Oh, yes.
And so that first 20% of precincts, based on your experience in Miami-Dade County, was that a count by hand of heavy Republican precincts or heavy Democrat precincts?
No, they predominantly were heavy Democratic precincts.
Are those the 388 votes that Al Gore's lawyers want to get into evidence before Judge Sauls?
Well, I'm not precisely sure about that, but the 388 votes that have been talked about are, in fact, the votes which were counted or observed from the predominantly Democratic precincts in Miami-Dade County
And
as a
in
result
fact-
of that process.
And in fact, do we even know, they were never certified as votes, were they?
No,
By anybody?
no.
And in connection with the vote not to go forward with the manual recount, was there, because of time problems, was there a Democrat effort before the board to go ahead and well, let's just count what you think you found in these undervotes in the 20% precincts, which were heavily Democrat?
Yes.
And did the board, I take it the board didn't do that?
It did not.
All right. Were there opinions expressed or statements made, is a better question, statements made by the board members as to why it is they were not going to go ahead and submit what they had found in just the Democrat precincts?
Yes. My recollection is that since the manual observation and recount of the heavily Democratic areas yielded these preliminary results, it would not be a competent or even a fair indication of what the results were for Miami-Dade County, since the counts had predominantly been in the very, very heavy Democratic areas, and the very, very heavy comparable Republican areas had not yet been counted or even observed.
If, in fact, the 20% had gone forward, would that have been counting Democrat votes but not the Cuban and Hispanic votes in the typically Republican precincts that might be found by the same process?
Well, it would have included those kinds of votes, but it also would not have included my vote.
You live in one of these precincts that has a higher number?
Yes, I live in a predominantly Republican area.
That assumes, of course, that you managed to perform the Dimple Shad maneuver, correct?
I did, and my precinct is 626, so it's in the higher numbers.
You don't know whether you have a Dimple Shad or not?
No, I don't.
Okay. Did you try to punch it all the way
No,
through?
the procedure is very simple and very clear, and I punched through clearly, and as the instructions said, I pulled the ballot up and looked to see whether there were any hanging or swinging chads, and turned it in.
All right. Let me turn just briefly to some ballot handling issues. But before I do, I want Judge Sauls to know something about you and Mr. Leahy. Are you and Mr. Leahy friends?
I would say so, yes.
Do you respect Mr. Leahy?
Very much so.
Do you respect the people at the Miami-Dade County board who worked there and tried so hard during the month of November?
Very much so. As a matter of fact, I think that if they could be given a Dade County Medal of Honor, they should be.
All right. All right, sir.
Honor, feel free to send us all home.
All right, so let me be quick about this. You had previously testified that all of the ballots, all 625,000 Miami-Dade ballots, had been through these machines 3 times.
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you observe the ballots going through the machine the 3rd time when Mr. Leahy, your friend, was trying to find what he thought might be undervotes?
Yes.
What did you tell the court what you observed?
Well, I believe that you're speaking of the run-through through the machines on the 19th of November.
The 19th, yes.
This was Sunday, and we appeared about 10 o'clock and stayed through the process.